Fett managed to do the unthinkable. He brought a team of 5 players who had never played together to the big stage, and he led them to a resounding victory over BDS, one of the most talented rosters in the world at the time, and immediately afterwards he would announce his retirement from the scene. Because of this, Fett has had one of the most successful careers in Rainbow Six Siege esports, managing to win a major international tournament within just a year of getting his big break, and now he is growing on social media at an insane pace because of his insurmountable knowledge on the subject of competitive Siege. So in today's video, I'm going to be telling his story from the beginning, from how he got into gaming, what brought him to Siege, how he climbed the competitive ladder, and what allowed him and his roster to take home that trophy on that infamous day. So follow me as I take you inside the mind of Fett, one of the greatest coaches in Siege history. Fett got into gaming like many of us did in the early days. His brother sat him down and introduced him to Minecraft, and immediately he was hooked on gaming. However, he would become so addicted that it would result in his grades declining and him becoming somewhat of a delinquent in his younger years.
I think I was a pretty bad kid. Like, I was a pretty rebellious kid. For like half of middle school, I didn't know homework was a thing, so I just didn't do it. I failed like every single class, and they had to pull her in for like intervention.
But these younger years, just like for many of us, was when Fett would jump from game to game. And as he got older, he would begin to experiment with competitive gaming, starting out by playing League of Legends and Counter-Strike. But he really didn't perform well in those games. So when his friends asked him to jump onto Siege, he happily did so.
I started playing Siege in white noise, and it was because my IRLs, like, they all were just like getting into Siege. There's like this one guy who was like, let's play Siege, and like everyone got into Siege. Everyone was addicted to Siege for like a month. Like, that was it. Like, we just all got hooked on the Siege, and suffice to say, I guess I ended up being the one who liked it the most.
It became his main game almost overnight. He began putting in countless hours in an attempt to get better, but he was never able to improve or get to the level he really wanted to be at. So he would begin to pursue a professional career in Siege to hopefully aid him in the learning process. And he would decide to do so by starting out as a coach in Tier 4 to better jumpstart his career.
I actually started my first team as a coach, which is the funniest thing, because it was like either join kind of like a no-name, like as a player, or get experience on like kind of like a T4 roster as a coach.
As he coached these lower level teams and rosters, Fett was able to build up a wide range of connections and hone in on his knowledge of the game, which would continue to drastically increase as his career continued. However, eventually, after coaching for a decent period of time, Fett would actually make the transition to being a player on a team that he formed, and he would manage to continue to climb up the tiers of professional play as a player after forming this team.
Let's just say someone on my CL team that I eventually coached got exposed. And they left, so then I had to like emergency sub in, and we actually won a couple games with me subbing in. It was pretty funny.
However, that period wouldn't last long for him because he would quickly start college in pursuit of his medical degree, and he felt that he wouldn't be able to commit enough in scrims and training to perform as a player. Fett also was never really considered to be the best player on his roster mechanically, but he always provided a ton of knowledge on the game at a competitive level. So he decided that being a coach was his best course of action, since it would require less time in comparison to being a player, and since he had a somewhat natural talent for it. After his decision to transition back to being a coach and to commit as much time as possible to it in early 2023, his career in esports would finally start to see some results, where he would spend a little time on Mirage, and he would also work as an assistant coach for Elevate. Then finally he'd get picked up by Beast Coast, which is where he would really start to see success in his career. Fett would join the team alongside a brand new roster that Beast Coast picked up. That team was composed of some names that Fett had come to know well over the years, including people like Mr. B, Doc, and Hat. But the team was also comprised of some well-known veterans that Fett and the people at Beast Coast hoped would help the team's inexperienced players thrive. However, the team would end up severely underperforming. What is the dynamic like in a team that has super experienced players like Hyper and Vertical, but also has a lot of inexperienced players like Doc, Hat, and Mr. B, specifically in tier 1 level? And do you think that hurts you or benefits you?
I think that team, as my first team, I wasn't strong enough as a leader to unite them enough. I felt like there was definitely like a split in what you said. Like, I think regardless of anything, like no matter who your 5 is, there needs to be a united culture of 5, right? like the 5 of you guys need to understand that you're all working for like a goal, and because of that, you create the culture on your team and you stay really close to your teammates, right? Like you guys are family.
They would perform awfully in NAL Stage 1 immediately after getting together, and that would be for a wide variety of reasons plaguing the team. Now, after this poor performance, Beast Coast would make some roster changes with the guidance of Fett in the hope that these changes would improve the team's performance. However, the team would achieve loss after loss in Stage 2 of NAL. Fett told me in our interview that he believed this was caused by a further breakdown in the team's culture. Many of the players had just simply lost the hope and drive to put in the effort. This was not a satisfactory performance for the roster, and Beast Coast immediately wanted to start from scratch with a brand new roster. Beast Coast told Fett their budget and gave him complete and utter reign over the new roster because they felt like they needed to try something different. Fett wanted to make this next roster work if he wanted to make a name for himself in the professional Siege space as a coach. He wanted to be the best in the world, and that wouldn't happen without the perfect roster. So Fett spent time scouting countless hours of VODs and did a ton of research on what players were either free agents or that were about to be dropped from the roster. Fett would end up deciding on an absolute stacked team of players. He would pick up Diffuser, who was someone who hadn't had a huge amount of experience in Tier 1, but he felt like was a good pickup. Gavini, who had been playing on Dark Zero as an entry, which he thought looked promising. Gunner, who was a flex player from the Sonics, who was a prime pickup, with him having a whole lot of experience compared to the rest of the teammates Fett chose, and he would also become a crucial player in upholding the team's morale going forward. Then he picked up the person with the most experience in the entire roster, Hot and Cold, someone who had made a name for himself across multiple rosters as being a great IGL and support player. All of these people combined with the final pickup of Spirits, who would be the team's other support player, would make the team extremely stacked on paper. However, what made this roster so interesting is that none of these players had ever interacted on a team together before. They had never played in a single match together. However, Fett believed this team played into his strengths as a coach.
I think it's my strengths as a coach, to toot my own horn. Like, I don't think I'm a good long-term coach. Low key, I'm very good at like elevating. Like, if you gave me a group of shit players, I don't think I could like bring them to win. But I think I'm very good at taking a group of good players that should win and like making sure they win.
After acquiring this roster and putting the work in, the whole team would achieve first place in Stage 1 of NAL. This was a massive improvement from the 9th and 4th positions Beast Coast had achieved with the previous rosters. So it was safe to say that Beast Coast was ecstatic with Fett's new roster pickups. However, Fett knew the team could achieve so much more. So in preparation for the Manchester Major, Fett would have the team boot camp in London and would spend as much time as possible trying to help the team fix their weaknesses.
We scrimmed a lot of international teams and we found out a lot about map pool matchups, and I think our roster's biggest weaknesses were just like certain maps that we matched up against other teams on. But it was like a double-edged sword because you also find out that like some regions simply cannot hang on like NA strongest maps. So I think that's where like a lot of like North American teams and honestly like overall teams fall short in general, is they don't realize like how strong and differential certain maps are going into other regions.
This bootcamp would also function as a way to prepare his new roster for the trials and tribulations of competing in an international competition, especially one at LAN where the stakes are much higher and the mental side effects can be extreme. Luckily, the roster did have a large amount of experienced players like Hot and Cold who could help with this preparation for the lesser experienced ones, and Fett obviously would play a huge role in preparing them as well. However, the team would have some pretty major losses in the playoffs of the tournament. Their first matchup against Dark Zero, a team from their region, wouldn't go so well, with the team from their home region managing to beat them 7-4 on Cafe. This would be followed up by their third match of the playoffs where they would lose again to FaZe 7-8 on Skyscraper. A much closer match, but it was still a loss nonetheless. This meant that Beast Coast would barely make it out of the playoffs with a positive win-loss, and things really weren't looking good for this newly formed roster. However, Fett was still confident in his team's abilities. After the playoffs, Fett would do the research on the teams they were going up against in Phase 3 and would come up with counter strats, potential weaknesses to exploit, and maps they could win on. The research would work wonders for their team's success in Phase 3. Their first matchup was FaZe, who they had versed earlier in the playoffs. However, this time Fett knew what the team needed to do and the roster was much more prepared. So they would end up beating FaZe on the first match, Nighthaven 7-4, and they would demolish FaZe on the second map, Cafe 7-1. This shows that the research Fett was doing clearly paid off, and the team's play was clearly way better than what we saw in the playoffs. They seemed to know exactly how FaZe played and were shutting down almost everything they tried to do swiftly. I also think Beast Coast did a great job in the map ban phase, forcing FaZe onto Nighthaven, one of North America's most prominent maps, and one of Beast Coast's best maps obviously put FaZe in a bad spot. And then the second map, being Cafe, was arguably good for Beast Coast as well, since it was a map they were clearly comfortable on in the past. Following this game up, Beast Coast would face Team Liquid in the semifinals, another Latin American team that was a strong opponent for Beast Coast to be going up against. But if they could manage to beat Team Liquid, they could make it to the grand final and have their chance to be crowned the best team in the world. And once again, just like with FaZe, Fett did his research beforehand, and you could tell, because they would beat Liquid 7-3 on Skyscraper and then follow it up by beating them again 7-5 on Bank. This would put Beast Coast on an absolute win streak, and the pressure was on going into the grand final of this event against BDS. BDS had always been a fan favorite team. Their roster is stacked with tournament winning players like Shaiko, Bride, and LeakyFac, and most people were expecting them to win this matchup. However, Fett and the team didn't view it that way.
We thought that because they had a language barrier, if we played like kind of a chaotic play style, we would fuck up their comms, and like it would, like if we just played like throw a wrench in the system, reset, throw a wrench in the system, reset, wrench, reset, wrench, reset, we thought it would just like fold them. And then like after the game, I was like, y'all, you know, like y'all are common English, and like how good is it so far? And Shaiko was literally like back in perfect English, like, yeah, boy, I speak English.
So the pressure was on. Fett knew the team had championship winning potential, but they would have to prove it on the server. Luckily, their first match was on Skyscraper, a map the team had become extremely comfortable on over the course of the tournament. Now, Beast Coast would struggle on the attacking half, tying BDS in score by the end of the half. However, this is Skyscraper we're talking about, a map that has always leaned heavily in the direction of the defense. So a 3-3 half definitely could be a lot worse. And luckily for Fett and his roster, they would immediately change the dynamic of the entire match as soon as they got their hands on defense, by only losing one singular round on that side. This allowed them to pick up enough rounds to take the first map of the series. This was an amazing start for a team that many people didn't think would manage to go to the distance. However, it reinforced the belief in the team's mind that they could win this thing, and this thought in the back of their minds would cause the pressure to mount against them. Following their matchup on Sky, Beast Coast found themselves on Consulate, a map they had very little experience on in the international setting and weren't exactly confident with. This would already put them at a disadvantage going in, but the pressure that was mounting in their heads wouldn't help. This would result in Beast Coast having their worst performance on a map in the entire event, only picking up 3 rounds from BDS, 2 on defense and 1 on attack. This would obviously take a toll on Beast Coast mentally, since they hadn't performed this poorly throughout the entire event. And while they were going into Chalet, a map they had chosen and clearly had a strategy to beat BDS on, it wouldn't be enough. And BDS would manage to edge out another victory against Beast Coast 7-5. This would mean that Beast Coast were now one poor showing away from being sent home with nothing to show for it. Fett had to prepare the team for what was to come, and he had to ensure the current situation wasn't hurting the team's ability to perform. However, Fett felt that he failed his team on this front.
So like I kind of folded as like a leader, because like, you know, I don't know. I felt like I was a pretty good leader for like the last 3 games up to that point, and that game I kind of just folded. And like I was like really dejected at the end of map 3, and I was picking up strats. And I turned around and Gunner's got everyone huddled, and he's just like, "If we lose, we lose. Let's go into this," you know. And then Gavin was like, "Yeah, make sure we're having fun. 1, 2, 3, fun. 1, 2, 3, fun." Like.
So with Fett's sole focus on strats and trying to make sure the team could best BDS in the next match to follow, Cafe and Border, he was hoping he could prepare his team enough to demolish expectations. Well, Cafe was a map Fett's roster had played multiple times in this very tournament, and it was a map they were comfortable enough with to challenge Dark Zero on it, one of the best teams in the world on the map. So to put it lightly, they had no worries about their chances going into this match, and they were able to pick up 3 defensive rounds, which isn't great for Cafe, but they would manage to wipe the floor with BDS in the second half, picking up 4 attacking rounds, securing their victory on the map. So Beast Coast, a newly formed roster that had never played together before and that had just been created a few months back by Fett, was now in the final map of a best of 5 against one of the best European teams ever. And they were fighting it out on Border, a map that Fett felt the team had an upper hand on. He had done the research and crafted the perfect strategies in preparation for this moment. All Beast Coast had to do was execute them. And let's just say the team would manage to do the unthinkable.
From the front and the back, and they secure it, but Trace 20 seconds. Bride and Asus to stop Beast Coast, to find a plan to keep themselves in it. Beast Coast, the wave, holding on for one more, 1 versus 3. But with 8 seconds left, Bride holding up for the plant.
This was it. Like, Siege for me, I hate to put it this way, but it was like, Siege for me was just a way to prove that I could be the best in the world at something, you know? So that's why I did it when I was young. And I hit that goal and I was like, damn, I'm just, you know, that's all it's ever been. It's just like proof that I can be the best in the world at something if I put my mind to it.
Fett had done it. He managed to lead a brand new roster with little experience together to win one of the most prestigious tournaments in Siege. The feeling was overwhelming, and he went up onto the main stage and raised the trophy in front of millions of viewers across the world. Beast Ghost was now the best team in the world, which meant Fett had just been crowned the best coach in the world. This was the moment Fett had been dreaming of, and he finally achieved it. Fett finally proved he was the best in the world at something, and to pursue his true passion, his medical degree, he would drop Pro League entirely shortly after this tournament to put his entire mindset into that career, and to also put more time into his content creation journey. He now posts videos on analyzing professional play and on giving tips to the average player. So, if that sounds interesting, I highly suggest you go subscribe to his channel. He's a friend of the channel and a really knowledgeable person on the topic of Siege, likely the most knowledgeable person I've ever met. Now, through my research and my conversations with Fett, there are a few huge takeaways I took from his extraordinary character and from this story. Firstly, he is extremely dedicated to everything he puts his mind to. When Fett has his mind on something, he has to commit and give it everything he's got. Whether that be his degree, his career in esports, or his content creation journey, Fett puts in the effort to ensure that he sees success. Fett is also extremely talented and likely a fast learner. Being able to climb the ranks of professional play as fast as he did requires the ability to adapt quickly, which many people lack, not to mention being able to build the connections and knowledge required to pick up and coach a roster like the one he managed to take all the way to the grand final of the Manchester Major. Another key takeaway that I got from my conversations with Fett is that his motivations aren't the same as most people in the space. He really just wanted to prove to himself and to the world that he could be the best at something. He saw many other people in his life achieving great things, and he just wanted to prove it to himself that he could do the same. And his proudest moment was becoming financially independent of his parents. He managed to accomplish all of that in just a few years of hard work and dedication. And I think that Fett's legacy will likely live on for many, many years to come inside of the professional esports space, especially if people like me continue to tell his story. Anyways, that about wraps up today's video. Let me know if you enjoyed it in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. If you did enjoy today's video, I make Siege content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. Like I said earlier, you should also check out Fett's channels in the comments down below. I'll have a link to his Twitch, his Twitter, and his YouTube in the description below. If you want to watch another video just like this one, a video will be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you all enjoy. And I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.